Hello and welcome to a Puzzled Panda video. Here are 100 facts about Dumbo. Dumbo is the fourth Disney animated feature film. It is based on a book written by Helen Aberson and Harold Pearl. The children's book was first brought to the attention of Walt Disney in late 1939 by Disney's head of merchandise, Kay Carmen. Walt Disney immediately fell in love with the story and bought the rights to it. When Walt Disney purchased the rights to the Dumbo story, his idea was to adapt it into an animated short. However, he eventually decided that there was enough story potential to turn this into a feature film. At the time, the Walt Disney Studio was in serious financial trouble due to the war in Europe, which caused Pinocchio and Fantasia to fail at the box office.
It wasn't but about 2 years later that I was almost broke.
Well, following Pinocchio and coming into the Fantasia period.
Yeah, that about did it, you know.
But that was a new
artistic
one.
Success, financial failure. You know?
Dumbo was intended to be a low-budget feature designed to bring revenue to the studio. Story artists Dick Huemer and Joe Grant were assigned to develop the plot into a feature-length film. Joe Grant was one of the few people that Walt trusted with the story. Joe was talented with inventing character designs and caricatures. Walt had Joe Grant lead the character model department. Early model sheets would have OK by JG, meaning OK by Joe Grant. This means the model sheets were approved by him and could be used by the animators. He left the studio in the 40s, but he came back in the 80s and provided ideas for the newer films being made. Joe Grant lived until he was 96. He was still working the day before he died, as he loved working on these films. He worked on Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, Fantasia 2000, and Monsters Inc. Grant was also specially mentioned in the credits for Monsters Inc. Dick Huemer was brought in by Disney to work on the Silly Symphony cartoons. Grant and Huemer worked well with each other and bounced ideas back and forth between them. They created the famous pink elephant and stork scene early on in the development. They wrote the story in an interesting way. They decided to write it in chapters. They would only give Walt Disney one chapter at a time. This would keep Walt wanting to find out what happened next. Dumbo is the first lead character in a Disney animated feature film to have no spoken dialogue. Dumbo's mother only speaks once, when she says Dumbo's original name, Jumbo. This was the last Disney animated feature film released before the entry of the United States in World War II. Everything would become very different after this. The budget was kept low, as Walt Disney knew he needed to earn back some money after the box office failures of Pinocchio and Fantasia. To save costs, they decided to keep the character designs and backgrounds simple. They used watercolour for the backgrounds. They were used because they were cheaper than the gouache and oils used for Pinocchio. Snow White used watercolour as well, but every other Disney feature has used oil and paint, until 2002, when Lilo and Stitch drew inspiration from Dumbo and used watercolour backgrounds as well. To save money, they used less special effects. They had crafted a good story that did not need special effects in the same way as Pinocchio and Bambi. Bambi would be the next release, which would be the first Disney film to aim for realism in the movement. Bambi took 9 years to make, because of the perfection Walt was looking for. In our previous videos, we have talked about the 9 old men. In this video, you'll not hear as much about them. This is because they were all working on Bambi. The animators who worked on this film were the original animators at Disney, who trained the young artists who became the 9 old men. Does that make sense? I refer to them as the 9 old men as we know them as the 9 old men, but at the time, they weren't old men. They were young men in their 20s. Right? Okay, on to the next fact. Despite not having the 9 old men, Joe Grant said Dumbo was a success because he had the best animators.
I asked Joe Grant one time, what is it that makes Dumbo great? And his answer was, well, we had all the top guys. So anybody who knows the 9 old men is thinking, oh, well, gee, but all of them were over there working on Bambi. And yet, on Dumbo, you had all these great people who taught that lot that was making Bambi.
Bill Tytler worked on the animation for Dumbo. Bill had worked on big scary characters before, like Stromboli and the Bald Mountain sequence. So it was incredible to see that he could also animate this cute small character. For the expressions and movements, Bill was inspired by his own son, who was 2 years old at the time. Fred Moore worked on the animation for Timothy Mouse. Timothy was a new addition to the story, and was not in the original book. They thought it would be funny to include a mouse as Dumbo's mentor, as traditionally elephants are scared of mice. The most famous animation sequence in the film is the pink elephant scene. The elephants morph into different shapes and colours throughout this incredible sequence. The layouts in this film are very clever, using lots of symbolism to hint ideas towards the audience.
Sometimes in animation lectures, when I'm talking about layout and storytelling and how that can help people's responses, I point out a sequence. Dumbo has been separated from his mother, and she's in the cage swaying back and forth, and she's got the shadows of the prison bars on her as stripes. You dissolve to Dumbo, and he's swaying back and forth sadly in front of the circus tent, which has stripes. And you immediately, subliminally connect the two. It's something that's very, very sophisticated filmmaking that doesn't come out and grab you and say, here, look at this symbolism. But it's something that they are doing very, very consciously.
It is one of Disney's shortest feature films, running at just 64 minutes. As you might know from my previous videos, RKO Pictures were the distributors of the Disney animated features at the time. They had issues with releasing a 64-minute feature as a major film. They tried to persuade Walt Disney to either cut it and release it as a short film or extend it to at least 70 minutes. Another suggestion they had was to release it as a B picture alongside another film. But Walt Disney stood his ground and the film was released as an A picture as he intended. Dumbo was a financial miracle compared to the other Disney films. The film only cost $950,000 to produce. This is half the cost of Snow White. It is less than a third of the cost of Pinocchio, and is certainly less expensive than Fantasia. Dumbo eventually grossed roughly more than 1.3 million during its original release. That is equivalent to $27,810,000 in today's money. Like other Disney films, the film was re-released in theatres in 1949, 1959, 1972 and 1976. Variety said that Dumbo was a pleasant little story, plenty of pathos, mixed with a large dose of humour, a number of appealing new animal characters, lots of good music and the usual Disney skillfulness in techniques in drawing and the use of colour. Dumbo was going to be on the front cover of Time magazine as Mammal of the Year. This was a play on their usual Man of the Year. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th of that year had it be replaced. The story was later published on December 29th. In 2011, Time named the film one of the 25 all-time best animated films. On the website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 98%, based on 41 reviews with an average score of 8 out of 10. It was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, and it won the Oscar for Best Scoring of a Musical Picture. Dumbo Circus is a live-action puppet television series for preschool audiences that aired on the Disney Channel in the 1980s. Dumbo the Flying Elephant is a popular ride that appears in many of the Disney parks. In the attraction, you ride in a Dumbo that takes you into the air and spins in a circle. The ride is currently in Disneyland, Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, Tokyo Disneyland, Disneyland Paris, and Hong Kong Disneyland. The original attraction opened at Disneyland in October 1955, 3 months after the park opened. In Disney World, they have opened a Play While You Wait area. Before the ride, guests step into a big top tent, which is air conditioned to cool people down in the Florida heat. Guests will be alerted when it's time for them to board their flight on Dumbo. The Casey Jr. Circus train is an attraction found at Disneyland and Disneyland Paris. This ride plays the famous Casey Jr. music in the background. In Disneyland Paris, The train goes around the storybook attraction and you can get a higher view of the models. In June 2009, Disneyland introduced a flying Dumbo to their nighttime fireworks show, in which the elephant flies around Sleeping Beauty's castle whilst fireworks synced music go off. Casey Jr. is the second float in the Main Street Electrical Parade. Casey Jr., driven by Goofy, pulls along a drum with a parade logo. The characters from Dumbo have featured in video games. The Ringmaster appears as one of the 4 villains in the 1999 PC game Disney Villains Revenge. In the game, the Disney villains alter the happy endings from Jiminy Cricket's book. The Ringmaster forces Dumbo to endlessly perform humiliating stunts in his circus. In the end, the Ringmaster is defeated when he is knocked unconscious by a custard pie. A video game on Atari was released called Dumbo's Flying Circus. Dumbo appears in the popular PlayStation 2 game Kingdom Hearts, released in 2002. He appears in the form of a summon that players can call upon in battle for aid. Sora, the protagonist, flies on Dumbo while he splashes enemies with water from his trunk. Dumbo returns as a summon in the follow-up game Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance. In 2001, a sequel of Dumbo was announced. The sequel was going to include a large cast of new characters. The project was in development for years, but in 2006, John Lasseter cancelled the plans for this film and other sequels to Disney's classic films. A live-action remake was directed by Tim Burton, and it was released in 2019. It was one of 4 remakes that was also released in 2019, the others being Aladdin, The Lion King, and Lady and the Tramp. Dumbo has appeared as a meetable character in the Disney parks in the past, and they're something. They're something. Dumbo merchandise is still available to this day. You can still find plush toys, collectibles, clothing, mugs, and many more items in stores and in Disney parks. Dumbo was an incredible success at a time when Walt Disney really needed a win. It was because of Dumbo's success that Walt Disney could continue making feature films, although it would be a tough road ahead with USA entering World War II. Thank you for watching this video. Please check out my other videos and like and subscribe. Come and find out 100 facts about other Disney films. Come back next week to find out 100 facts about Bambi.